Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to another episode of our /ProRevenge, where in today's episode, you'll hear a kind of crazy, controversial revenge where OP absolutely obliterates a man who cheats on her aunt. Guys, there's also going to be two other great revenges in this one, so sit back, grab a drink, and get ready to listen to some stories where people get what they deserve. I hope you enjoy them, and do hit that subscribe button for future tales. I met an amazing mentor while doing my master's in the US, who hired me to work for a company where he was the COO after I graduated. Now, I'm an immigrant to the US, so my visa is conditioned upon being employed. If I get fired, I would quickly get deported back to the Middle East. The CEO of that company was planning on selling the company to a much larger firm, so he wanted to maximize revenue in the short term so he could get a better price for it. Now, the guy also had a huge ego, and so did the sales VP. She was convinced that I was too young and inexperienced for my job and tried to sabotage me quite often. So a part of my job was ensuring that we respected out of terms used for the data we bought from our suppliers. I would make sure that our customers used it in a pre-approved way, that the engineers used and encrypted the right data for each product, and that we reported usage and sales accurately so that the suppliers could bill us. Well, the sales VP and the CEO had approved a bunch of deals where they allowed the customer to use the data in a way that breached our supplier contracts, and they underreported sales to the supplier, so that they could pad the company's revenue and get a bigger payout once they sold it. Now, I had brought this up to them because I thought they might have gotten the contract terms wrong at first, but then they threatened to fire me and have me deported if I opened my mouth or didn't go along with them. Now, whistleblowing would have just gotten me deported anyway, since the suppliers were not based in the US. One of the suppliers asked to audit our reported sales data, but the CEO kept delaying the audits and hid it from the firm who was going to buy us. Now, I decided that I'd keep track of every single transaction they made in that way. So after the firm bought the company, I was one of the people they kept on because I was managing the product lines really well at the time. I got along with the new owners quite well. So when they decided to review the contracts and discover the audits, I gave them every single file I had on those fraudulent transactions. The company had been in breach of contract with many suppliers, and I had the paper trail to prove it. The new owners immediately worked with the supplier to address the issue and reimburse them. They then claimed that this additional expense had been incurred before the purchase. They then deducted it and the revenue based on it from the company's total value, and then took that out of the payout that was supposed to be given to the CEO and the VP. Those two scumbags did not make a single cent off selling their company, and that's after they worked on it for 6 years. Guys, I absolutely love the fallout of the story. I absolutely love reading stories where people try to screw over others, and it goes terribly wrong. And what makes this revenge so much more satisfying is that OP's documentation left those two scumbags with absolutely nothing. Okay, so my mom has been best friends with Eileen, not her real name, since they were both kids. I've known Eileen pretty much my whole life. I've called her Auntie Eileen, and she was family to me. So about 5 years ago, Eileen's husband of more than 25 years surprised her by asking for a divorce. Eileen lived about 6 hours away from my mom at the time, and I lived out of state, so I didn't find out how everything went down until a few months after the divorce was finalized. Now, unfortunately, Eileen's life spiraled out of control after the separation and the divorce. She developed depression and a drinking problem. She became a battered and a broken woman, but my mom and some other childhood friends were able to convince her to move back to her hometown, and then they convinced her to go to rehab. I moved back home shortly before Eileen went to rehab, and because of my school and work schedule was pretty flexible, I was able to house sit and take care of some stuff while she was in rehab. So the first time I saw her in rehab, I got the whole divorce story, and it was pretty bad. Eileen's ex, who we'll call Jeff, not a real name, hadn't talked to Eileen about any problems prior to asking for a divorce, so she just assumed that he fell out of love with her. But I was immediately skeptical about the things Eileen told me. First off, Jeff, who was an executive at a pharmaceutical company who was earning 6 figures, was fired from his job a year before they split up and decided to take a break before looking for another job. Now, that was weird to me that Jeff decided to take a break from work because he's always been such a workaholic. Eileen hasn't worked in years because of a disability, but she has some property and a trust her parents left her that lets her live a comfortable life without working. Jeff and Eileen lived off money from the trust while he was unemployed. Then, after Jeff said he wanted a divorce, he refused to go to couples therapy to talk about why he wanted the divorce. The only thing he would say is that they had grown apart, and he was sick of being with a woman like Eileen. He said Eileen's mother was right about her. Eileen's mother was a classic narcissist. She picked on Eileen horribly about her attractiveness, her weight, her intelligence, etc., which caused a lot of psychological problems that Jeff knows about. Finally, right after the divorce was finalized, Jeff moved out of state, but to a state that he didn't have any prior connections or family in. Now, Jeff's parents are still alive, or in their 80s and 90s, and Jeff is close to them, so it didn't make any sense to me why Jeff wouldn't move to be closer to them if he wanted to move after the divorce. I didn't say anything to Eileen because I didn't want to upset her, but I thought Jeff might have been having an affair. I also think that he had orchestrated his unemployment to avoid paying alimony, and then moved out of state to be with his mistress. I just didn't have a way to confirm it at the time. Then, Eileen asked me to look for a box of Jeff's stuff that he had asked her to hold for him until he moved into his new apartment. She told me all the info on the box, the contents, and his new address was in the email he sent her. And she gave me the password to her computer so I could access the email. And this is where I lucked out. It turns out that Jeff had used her computer and set up his email on the computer. I accidentally clicked on the app for his email when I was searching for Eileen's email, so I decided to take a peek at his email. The first thing I noticed was that he had mostly stopped using that email address 3 years before, which was about a year before he was fired. In the folder for digital receipts, I found a confirmation email for a dating website, Plenty of Fish, which I think he saved there accidentally. I also found a verification email for a new email address. I started to put together a speculative timeline of what happened. I guessed that about 3 years before, Jeff had started an affair. And shortly after, he decided to get a new email address to help keep the affair secret. I wanted to access his dating profile to get a little bit more information. So I tried to use the forget password feature to see if I could generate an email that would allow me to reset the password and log in that way. Unfortunately, the dating website did not recognize Jeff's old email address. I thought maybe I would be able to access Jeff's new email using his old email to reset the password, and then maybe I could use the new email to get into the dating website. But I didn't want to risk locking Jeff out of his new email and alerting him until I knew more about what he'd done. And here's where I totally lucked out. The email app that Jeff downloaded onto Eileen's MacBook had a note feature, and super genius Jeff saved some password onto his notes. Now, most passwords weren't helpful, but I did get the password to the dating website and his Twitter and Netflix accounts. I logged into the dating website using his new email address and the password. I was able to read the messages that Jeff sent to another woman before he broke up with Eileen. The new mistress sent Jeff the email address in one of the messages. I then searched Facebook for her email address and found her profile. Now, I couldn't read the mistress's post, but she left her photos public. She had recent photos of her and Jeff, so I knew they were still together. She also posted a photo of a construction crew breaking ground on a new home for her and Jeff, which was interesting, because I got the impression from Eileen that Jeff did not have a lot of money after the divorce. Now, here's where my background is important. Now, at the time, I was attending law school and had access to Lexis's database, specifically their public records database. I had spent a good portion of one of my summer internships tracking down property records and other assets to help recover judgments for clients, so I knew how to search for public records. The mistress had purchased several acres in a wealthy suburb several months before Jeff filed for divorce, and there was no mortgage listed on the record. I had already found the mistress's LinkedIn page, so I knew she worked as an executive assistant before she moved out of state with Jeff. Now, she didn't advertise her salary, but I doubted she could have afforded the property with only her salary alone. It's possible that she had money outside of her salary, but I suspected Jeff gave her money to purchase the land before he filed for divorce. I also found an updated record in the Lexis, showing Jeff and the mistress as joint owners of the property. Now, I was still hesitant to try to log into Jeff's new email, so I decided to check his old email again to see if there was anything else I should investigate before moving to the new email. Now, I didn't find anything, but I did notice that many of the passwords in his notes were the same. I decided to try to log into his new email using the same password he used for the dating site. I figured the two accounts were created around the same time, so if he had recycled a password, that was most likely the candidate, and it worked. His new email was a goldmine. Because the story is already getting ridiculously long, I'll list some of the relevant stuff that I found. 1. Jeff hadn't been fired from his old job. He quit and lied to Eileen. I found an email from his admin asking where to have the payroll send his last check and the details about a goodbye party for him. 2. I found some emails between Jeff and a boat repair person mentioning a leak somewhere on one side of the sailboat near the engine compartment. The repair guy couldn't find the source of the leak, but he talked about current and future problems with mold and the engine on that side. 3. I saw emails between Jeff and the boat broker, which included the email address of buyers farther down in the string. 4. I found emails between Jeff and his contractor about changes they made to the new house's sunroom. 5. I found emails between Jeff and his mistress. They had married. 6. The mistress and Jeff shared a calendar. 7. I saw some flirty emails between Jeff and another woman. 8. I found emails with info on Jeff's new employer. I downloaded all the important emails and their attachments and started to think about a revenge plan. So, in my mind, everything was fair game. He lied about being fired, so I wanted him fired from his new job. I suspected he hid his money before the separation from Eileen to help pay for his new house, so I wanted him to lose his house. He cheated, so I wanted to destroy his new relationship. Anything I could do about the boat was a bonus. Now, the easiest place to start was the boat. I had no idea if the source of the leak was found and repaired, or if the leak was verbally disclosed to the buyer, but I found that Jeff was a lying jerk, so the odds were fair that he hid the info from the new buyer. I sent emails between Jeff and the repairman, and another copy of the inspection to the buyer. I searched Jeff's county court website 5 or 6 months later and found out the buyers had filed a lawsuit against Jeff. I couldn't figure out how to take or destroy Jeff's house, so I settled for contacting the county inspector's office to complain about the sunroom not being up to code. Now, this is actually what prompted me to write this post because I just found out some details about what happened with the county inspectors. Now, it turns out the sunroom was code compliant, but the inspector did find a workshop attached to the detached garage that wasn't on the original plans, and there wasn't a permit for it. The workshop had a bathroom that the contractor attached to the property's septic system after the initial inspection. A mutual friend of Eileen and Jeff told Eileen and me that he guessed this was a big deal because of the size of the septic system. The size they installed wasn't sized to handle the additional input, but I don't know for sure. Jeff had to pay a fine and the workshop had to be removed. This ended up causing construction delays, which will become relevant below. So as for destroying Jeff's marriage, my first impulse was to send the new wife the flirty emails between Jeff and the other woman. But when I searched for that woman on social media, I couldn't find anything. I had no way of knowing if the wife knew the other woman and would think that the emails weren't important or evidence of an affair. Then I played around with the idea of updating Jeff's dating profile and sending stuff to his wife, but it would take too long to manufacture a fake relationship with real dates and times, and I was worried that Jeff might get an email alert from the dating site that would clue him in. So I ended up just risking that his new wife wouldn't know the other woman. I pretended to be someone concerned about an affair between Jeff and the new woman. Now overall, I kept the accusation vague. But I did say that Jeff and the new girl went out to eat and to the movies on a few dates that Jeff's shared calendar said his new wife was out of town. I couldn't come up with a way to get Jeff fired. I rechecked his email and calendar over several weeks looking for something I could use to get him fired. Eventually, my legal residency got too busy to devote much time to revenge, so I decided to just let it go. Eileen recently reconnected with a friend of Jeff, and that friend gave Eileen an update on Jeff. Eileen shared the details with me, and that's what reminded me of what I did and prompted this story. It turns out that I didn't need to worry about sabotaging Jeff's career. By luck, the woman that Jeff had been emailing was actually his assistant at his new job, and Jeff's new boss was his brother-in-law. Jeff and his new wife actually moved to her hometown so she could be close to her family and so Jeff could go to work with his new brother-in-law. Now, I have no idea if Jeff was actually cheating. He told a mutual friend that passed the story on to Eileen that they hadn't been having an affair. It didn't matter to his new wife though, because she and Jeff got together when Jeff was already married, and she didn't have a lot of trust for Jeff. She did not believe Jeff's denials when I sent the email about him having an affair, and she filed for divorce. And Jeff's brother-in-law boss fired him. And since the construction was delayed, the new house wasn't finished when Jeff and his new wife divorced. They had to sell an unfinished home, and Jeff took a big financial hit. Finally, these weren't part of my larger revenge plan, but I'm pretty petty, so 1. I took the box of Jeff's stuff, mostly photographs, and threw them away. I told Eileen that they must have been lost in the move. 2. I signed both of Jeff's email addresses for a bunch of spam, newsletters, mailing lists, etc. 3. I deleted his Netflix watch list. 4. I posted, retweeted, and liked a bunch of porn on his Twitter account and deleted all the accounts he was following. Now, I never told Eileen what I did, because I wanted her to have a plausible deniability and didn't want to interfere with her recovery. She doesn't know about the boat lawsuit or the Netflix Twitter stuff, but she did take satisfaction from the divorce and the job loss. Now, I probably would have let it all go if Jeff had just cheated, because I had always liked Jeff. I always thought he was nice, but I was obviously wrong about him. Nice people don't weaponize abuse to mentally torture their wives. As far as I'm concerned, Jeff deserved everything I did to him. Guys, that was a wild story. But going through the comments, a lot of people aren't really approving of what OP did. So a lot of people do say that Jeff did get what he deserved, but the fact that OP did so many illegal things while being a law student, a lot of people say that OP was worse than Jeff in the end. This person right here says Jeff wronged Eileen, not OP. OP had no moral authority to do anything, but still engaged in highly unethical behavior. Just another scumbag lawyer being a dick because they could. Shameful. So my friends, with that said, let me know your thoughts and your comments on this revenge. So a little bit of background. I worked for an office for a large supermarket in the UK. Now, we had a team leader who was a dick. He was never in the wrong, always had the what I say goes attitude, and he would ask really inappropriate questions if you'd been ill. Really probing questions that were unnecessary. So one day, he gets promoted to the team leader of the team above us. They were involved in the data side of things, and we thought we'd have seen the last of him. But he used his data team to run reports on who was doing what. He generally messed with his old team, and he was universally despised. Background over. So one day, we had an issue with pricing in our stores. Meat was going through the till at twice the normal price. No biggie, these things happen from time to time. So in our supermarkets, we have a policy that if we overcharge you, you get double the overcharge back. So say a leg of lamb was 28 pounds and you got charged double, which is 56 pounds. If you paid, got home, and checked the receipt, you can go back to the store and get 56 pounds refunded, and you get to keep the product. Now, Dick manager, knowing this, went shopping after work. He put the meat that had the pricing issue into his cart. Once he got to the checkout, he pretended to be a genuine customer, he paid the overcharge for all of the items, and a few minutes later, he comes back inside after realizing his mistake, that he'd been overcharged. They sent him to customer service. Now, the dick had always been so self-important that he didn't realize the girl behind the counter used to work in our office. She knew he was a conniving man and up to no good. Luckily, he didn't recognize her, and she made some excuses and spoke to the manager. She basically said to the manager, "I used to work with this guy, and I know that he's up to no good. This guy's pulling a fast one." And he agreed. So the manager comes out and says, "I understand you've been overcharged on some meat." Dick says, "Yes, I want the refund on double the difference." The manager then said, "Did the lady behind the till tell you about the overcharge before she started to scan?" Dick said, "Yes, and I was told to come here." The manager then says, "Well, if you were told before the items were scanned that we had this fault, all we can do is give you back what you've been overcharged." Now, 90% of the people do get double the difference. We only pull this policy out if someone has clearly done it to scam cash, and we're totally legally allowed to do this. Dick says, "This is ridiculous. I know the policy. I manage the store's policy throughout the UK." So the manager then says, "Excuse me, but how do you manage the policies?" Dick says, "I work in the head office, and I'm not some low-level grunt either." The manager then says, "Oh, sorry, sir. Can I take your staff card?" Dick says, "Yeah, here it is," looking very smug. The manager then says, "I'll go get this sorted out right away for you." And Dick says, "No problem." So the manager then proceeds to phone us, and lo and behold, it was his old team that picked up the call. So the first thing he asked was, did we have a manager there by Dick's name, and could he speak to his boss? Dick's boss took the call and said to the manager, "Can you ask Dick to come into your office? I need to talk to him." So the next day, Dick was let go, and he was told he would not get a reference from us, And if he did get one, it would say he was dismissed due to fraud against the company. I heard he was working for a small pizza joint after that. A bit of a downgrade from his team lead position. Now, the best part is, the staff found out which pizza place he worked in and would go in and order meat pizzas, making sure they got all the extra meat they ordered. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. Guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, do hit the thumbs up. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, I will link it right here. A Karen blackmails a teacher for failing her son, and it gets so bad, guys. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.